Hey guys, bachphotography here, and today we're looking at another portrait session with model Shiloh. Link in the description to her Instagram where you can check out more of her work if you're interested, and I'm also going to leave a Dropbox link to all of the photos from this photo shoot if you'd like to edit along or if you'd just like to edit some of these photos in your own time. So if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you can be notified whenever I make a new video like this. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the camera equipment that I used in this photo shoot. We're going to look at camera settings for particular photos. Then we're going to go into posing and lighting techniques. And finally, we're going to do a start to finish Photoshop editing session of one of the photos from the shoot. And if you're interested in any of the equipment I used in this photo shoot, there'll be a link in the description to all the individual pieces. So the camera equipment I used for this photo shoot was a Canon 5D Mark IV, and a Sigma 50mm f1.4 art lens. And if you're personally using an APS-C camera, you can achieve a similar look with a 35mm prime lens. Now when it comes to lighting, you can see in this video that the entire area that we're in is shaded. And if you look a little bit higher than our head height, you can actually see where the sun is glaring over the buildings. But we made sure to stay completely in shade just to get the softest light possible in our photo shoot. Because when we were shooting these photos, it was still quite sunny outside and it wasn't late in the day. It was about 2 o'clock, so the sun was still quite high in the sky. And the problem with that when you're shooting portraits, particularly if there aren't any clouds in the sky, is that the sun will create really harsh highlights and shadows in your scene. So if you can find a shaded area, you can stop having any harsh highlights and shadows, which means that you can have a really flat, smooth lighting across your entire image. So this is the image that we're going to be looking at in particular in this video. I was shooting at a aperture of f1.4, a shutter speed of 1/1250th of a second, and an ISO of 200. So let's talk a little bit about why I chose those settings for this particular photo. I chose an aperture of f1.4 because even though you can't really see much of the background and everything is on quite a similar focal plane, because I was shooting so close to her, shooting at a low aperture meant I could really blur out her skin but keep her eyes nice and sharp. So basically the reason I shot at f1.4 is to slightly blur out the background, but mainly to blur out her skin and just make her skin look more smooth and appealing. I shot at a shutter speed of 1/1250th of a second because it was still quite bright outside, which meant I could really stop down the shutter speed and get a nice sharp image without any movement blur. I shot at an ISO of 200 because that is the native ISO of my Canon 5D Mark IV. And what I mean by that is it's the base ISO of my camera, meaning that I'll get the best quality signal to my sensor and the best quality image for post-processing in Photoshop, where there'll be the least amount of noise and the most dynamic range in the highlights and the shadows. So now it's time to jump into Photoshop and go through the editing of this image. Just remember that in the description I have a link to Dropbox with all of the photos if you'd like to edit along. Alright, so now we're in Photoshop in Camera Raw, and we're just going to add a little bit more exposure to the image, just to make it a little bit brighter, and then we're going to add some clarity just to get some more mid-tone contrast and really make the mid-tones pop. Then we're going to drop the shadows a little bit. Just going to have a look around on the slider and drop it down about 24 points, add a little bit of contrast, and then drop the blacks as well. Okay, that looks pretty good. Next thing we're going to do is just get the brush tool. We're going to add a little bit of clarity and a little bit of exposure to the brush. And we're just going to add a little bit more exposure and clarity to her eyes. And this is just to make her eyes pop a little bit more and draw focus from the viewer. Now you don't want to go super extreme with this. You want to keep the eyes relatively the same color as they were before and the same brightness. Otherwise you risk giving your model laser beam eyes. But just adding a little bit really makes the eyes pop. So the next thing we're doing here is just dropping the blacks, the shadows and the exposure so that I can use the brush tool as a masking tool. And I'm just going to mask all of the parts of her skin that I'd like to smooth. So you can be quite rough with this, but try not to get any of the brush over contrasting lines such as her eyebrows, her eyes, her nostrils and things like that, because when you smooth the skin with this technique, it will make those sharp lines blurry and we don't want that. So we're just going to get a mask of all the parts of her skin that we want to make a little blurrier and a little softer. And you can do this on the face, you can do this on the hands, you can do it on necks and legs as well. So just going to do her right hand as well and also her leg. So basically what we're going to do here is once we've got a selection of all the parts of skin that we like, we're going to drop the clarity and basically get rid of any of the mid-tone contrast in those images, in those areas. And basically what that does is smooths out the entire area. And finally just going to do her shoulder here as well. And her neck. Although her neck is probably smooth enough, but we might as well do it for good measure as well. Okay, so once we've got that selected, we can get rid of the blacks, shadows, and exposure adjustment, and then drop the clarity slightly. I like to drop it normally around 20 to 30 points, so for this one, 24 points is good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just drop the shadows and add a little bit of saturation into her hair, just to make her hair look a little bit more three-dimensional and a little bit more colourful as well. She had really nice, full, thick hair, so drawing attention to that part of her in the portrait will make the image look a little bit more dramatic. Okay, so that's everything we did in Camera Raw. Now let's jump into Photoshop and finish off this image. The first thing we're going to do is just get rid of any imperfections that we can see on Shiloh's skin. Now her skin was really good and her makeup was good as well, so you can't really see that many. And also because we shot at f1.4, this will be quite a quick step. So we're just going to get rid of any of the imperfections that we can see using the patch tool. And basically the patch tool, what you do is you circle a part of the skin that you don't like and you drag into an area that you do, and basically it does pattern matching and color matching to smooth that area of the skin. What we can also do while our layer is locked is just circle something that we don't like on her skin and then press delete, and what the computer will do is a content aware fill where it'll use an algorithm to work out a approximation of what the pattern and what the skin should be without that difference on the skin. So that's another way that you can smooth skin as well. So if you wanted to make a really good job of this would probably take about 30 to 45 minutes to really make Shiloh's skin look perfect. But in the interest of time, we're just going to do a quick and dirty skin smooth, and then we'll move on to the next step. So once we've got all of the really big imperfections, well there weren't any really big imperfections, we're going to do another skin smoothing technique in just a second. I'll just remove that bruise on her leg as well. Alright, so what we're doing here is we're going to take a selection of an entire image, an entire section that we want to blur all in one go. We're going to use the Gaussian blur on 1 pixel just to smooth out area by area little bits of her skin to make it look more smooth and perfect. So again, that's filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And you've got to be careful not to blur too much, otherwise it will start looking strange. And keep the blur on a very low level, about 1 pixel, just so you don't get any hard lines where the blur starts and stops. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make her hair a little bit larger. Now this is quite tricky on an image like this just because there are so many geometric shapes. You can see the bricks on the right, if you start bending them too much they start looking all warped, and on the green door as well it's got lines that we have to correct every time we change her hair. But basically what we're doing here is we're just going to liquefy her hair to be more thick, more full, and then once we've done that we're going to correct all of the lines on the bricks and all of the lines on the wall just to keep them straight. And again, just a subtle change, you don't want to go crazy with the liquefy tool because when you do stretch pixels, it means that you sort of lose quality because pixels get duplicated. And when pixels get duplicated, things start to look a bit strange. So just doing subtle changes with the liquefy tool to make her hair a little bit bigger without losing any quality. So I'm just going to jump back into Camera Raw filter again and add a little bit more color to her lips and also just remove a little bit of the yellowness from her teeth as well. So just adding a little bit of exposure and changing the yellows to blue very slightly and just getting rid of a little bit of yellowness there. And then what we're going to do here is boost the saturation and just remove the temperature back into the neutral color and add a little bit more saturation to her lips. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a curves layer, and we're going to boost the curves up into the highlight area a little bit, and then press Control I, or Command I if you're on a Mac. And basically what we're going to do here is create a mask, and just add a little bit more highlights with a very, very soft brush into the highlighted areas of her face. And basically the reason we're doing that is just to make her features look a little bit more dramatic and to make her face look a little bit more three-dimensional in the image. So just adding a little bit more highlight to her cheek, to her nose, a little bit above her eyebrows, and some on her lips as well. And just adding a little bit in the corners of her eyes, just to make her eyes pop a little bit more again. So as you can see in the before and after, this change is very subtle, but once you get all of these very small changes and put them together, it really makes a dramatic difference in the image. So what we're doing here is another curve selection. We're going to make a curves mask, but this time drop into the shadows, and then press Command I on a Mac or Control I on Windows, which makes a shadows mask if you like. And then using that very, very soft paintbrush on 15% opacity, we're just going to add a little bit more shadows into the shadowy areas of her face. So on her contour, on her eyebrows, that sort of thing, just to make her face a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more three-dimensional in the image. So here's before and after. Again, just a very subtle change, and that's before and after on both of the layers as well. So still a subtle change, but I think it really does make a big difference. Alright, so that's everything. Thank you very much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be making a lot more content like this in the future. And once again, a link in the description to all of the equipment I used in this photo shoot. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I'll see you in the next one.